What if I told you that one of the most powerful financial dynasties in modern history didn't come from Europe? What if the Rothschilds of the East weren't just a nickname, but a real empire of bankers who financed kingdoms, controlled regional trade, built economic bridges between civilizations, and then disappeared so completely that most people today have never heard their name? How does a dynasty rise high enough to influence wars, shape currencies, and determine the fate of nations, yet vanish from the pages of popular history? Who erased them? Or did they erase themselves? Today, we uncover a story that challenges everything you think you know about global finance, power, and the unseen forces that shape the modern world. This is the forgotten dynasty history tried to bury. Chapter 1: Setting the Stage. The world before the dynasty. To understand the rise of this Eastern financial empire, we need to step back to a time when Asia was undergoing massive transformation. It's the late 18th and early 19th centuries. Western banks dominate international finance. The Rothschilds in Europe are funding monarchs. The East India Company is reshaping trade routes. And colonial powers are bleeding Asia for resources. Amid this global storm, a completely different force begins to rise in the East, not through conquest, not through empire, but through finance. This force is the Sassoon family. But how did a family that once lived quietly in Baghdad rise to hold influence over Bombay, Shanghai, Hong Kong, Singapore, and even the politics of the British Empire? How did they become so powerful that diplomats, viceroys, and monarchs privately called them the Rothschilds of the East? And more importantly, how did they build a system so huge, so interconnected, that when it finally broke, half of Asia felt the shockwaves? Let's go back to where their story truly begins. Chapter 2: Origins. A family on the move. The Sassoon story doesn't start with wealth, it starts with exile. In 1828, political instability in Baghdad forced the Sassoon patriarch David Sassoon to flee his homeland. He left with almost nothing. But what he did have was knowledge. Knowledge of trade routes, financial systems, bookkeeping, and the trust of merchants across the Middle East. David settled in Bombay, today's Mumbai, where the British Empire was building its eastern headquarters. He didn't have soldiers, he didn't have land, but he had something far more powerful: a network. He built warehouses, opened trading offices, and established a reputation for absolute honesty, something incredibly rare in the chaotic global trade markets of the time. In less than 20 years, David Sassoon and Co. had become one of the most trusted trading houses in Asia. But trust alone didn't make them the Rothschilds of the East. What is a single product? A product that would shape their destiny, and also begin their downfall. Chapter 3: Rise of Power. The Opium Years. Opium, the drug that reconfigured world politics. When the British wanted to dominate Chinese trade, they turned to opium to weaken China's economy and society. And the Sassoons, master logisticians and traders, became central players. The Sassoon network expanded to Shanghai, Hong Kong, and Singapore. They built docks, factories, shipping fleets, and trading outposts. They became so powerful that British officials jokingly said, "Half of Bombay belongs to the Sassoons." By the 1860s, their empire spanned India, China, Burma, Japan, the Persian Gulf, Singapore, and financial centers across Europe. Their wealth rivaled European aristocrats. Their influence touched governments, trade regulations, and entire economies. And yet their story wasn't just about opium. They also funded textile mills, railways, infrastructure, banks, cultural institutions, and philanthropy on a scale unheard of in Asia at the time. They built synagogues, libraries, hospitals, and schools across India and China. A dynasty once stateless had become indispensable to Eastern trade. But with great influence comes great vulnerability. Empires, especially financial ones, rarely fall from natural causes. They fall because something, somewhere, breaks. Chapter 4: The breaking point to events. 1 in China. 1 in India shook the Sassoon Empire to its core. 1. The fall of opium trade. By the late 1800s, China began to crack down on opium. Public pressure grew. The Qing government tightened controls. Global opinion shifted. The product that built the foundation of Sassoon wealth was disappearing. The empire's main artery was collapsing. 2 rival families rise. Another powerful family, the Totisi, emerged in India. They focused on steel, textiles, and modern industry. Unlike the Sassoons, who specialized in trade, the Tatas built hard infrastructure. The balance of power in Bombay shifted. 3. Internal division. The next generation of Sassoons did something the first generation never would have. They moved away from Asia. Some settled in London, some focused on philanthropy. Others diversified in ways that fractured the company's unity. The once tight network based on trust, discipline, and focus began to loosen. And finally, for global competition. Western banking giants Rothschilds, Barings, and others began dominating Asian finance. The Sassoons were no longer the only global players. They were now part of a crowded field. By the early 1900s, the family's influence was shrinking. But the final blow was something no dynasty can escape. The world changed. Chapter 5: Fallout. How the empire faded. World War I changed global trade. The collapse of the Qing dynasty changed China. India's independence movement changed Bombay forever. And the Great Depression destabilized global finance. One by one, Sassoon businesses were sold, merged, or shut down. Ports they once controlled shifted to state ownership. Now mills they built were overtaken by local competitors, while their banking interests were swallowed by larger institutions. By the mid-20th century, the dynasty that once connected continents had mostly faded into quiet wealth. Today, only fragments remain: historic buildings, a few surviving companies, and philanthropic legacies. Companies like Facebook, Alibaba, and TikTok depend on networks just like the Sassoons. If their main product or market shifts, their entire empire trembles. 2. Global supply chains. Modern trade networks are fragile. Single disruption, pandemic, war, sanctions can collapse billion-dollar systems overnight. 3. Concentrated power. In 1890, the Sassoons controlled ports, warehouses, ships, and capital. In 2025, a handful of companies control data, apps, platforms, and cloud services. Power hasn't disappeared. It has simply changed form. And here's the most shocking parallel. In both eras, the world became dependent on a single, narrow system till that system broke. History doesn't repeat, but it rhymes. And today, the rhyme is getting louder. Chapter 7: 3 Takeaways. 1. Networks create empires. It's not armies that build modern power. It's financial networks, trade routes, and information flows. 2. Concentration creates fragility. What rises fast because of one product or system falls just as fast when that system disappears. 3. Forgotten stories hide important lessons. The Sassoons were erased from mainstream history because their influence was quiet. But quiet power is still power. If we forget these stories, we fail to understand the world we live in today. Final warning: every global system looks stable until the day it isn't. The Sassoons didn't fall because they were weak. They fell because the world around them changed faster than they could adapt. And today, our world is changing even faster. Call to action. If you want more stories about hidden empires, forgotten dynasties, and the invisible forces shaping our world, make sure to subscribe, like, and share this video. Because history doesn't just teach us where we came from, it warns us where we're going.